Hey, Spuds, we are learning about motion graphics. So we're going to take our knowledge of bouncing ball and move forward with a promotion. These skills are going to help you create a promotion that's unveiled in class. So, and this is all the technical stuff about how to use After Effects on the next level. First, I'm going to open After Effects and start a new project. We've already done that. And then I'm going to make a new composition. Each training will be a new composition. So I'm going to create a new composition. This composition is called easing. This is our principle that we're learning. You can keep the same specs that we always have, 1920 by 1080. I'm going to change my frame rate to 30. That should be probably set for you. Background color of your choice, I'm going to leave it black, and then duration, I'm just going to make that 30. That's probably what you have as well. All of those are fine. I'm going to hit OK. And then I have my timeline and my composition over here. I'd like you to create 4 separate shapes. They can be whatever you want. They need to live on the left-hand side. I'm just going to create maybe a white box. If I hold Shift while after I click, I will create a box. And my preference isn't set. Again, if your preference isn't set, which I'm going to do on my Mac here, it'll help you center your anchor point. That one right there is the one that I need to have on. Okay, try it again. Click and drag, and then hold Shift, and then I can move my square around. Okay. I'm just going to duplicate my layer. This is another function that might be helpful. If you have a layer selected, Control D is duplicate. Now I have a second layer here. I'm going to color that something different so I know the difference. Control D again. Just going to bring that down. The goal is to have four different layers. Let's go there. Okay, these can be circles or squares, doesn't matter, as long as they fit on the left-hand side. These are now separate layers. They don't have very good names, so we're going to name them. And we also want to distribute them evenly. So aligning and distributing, if you've never taken graphic design, is a key design tool. I'm going to select them all. I can do that by clicking and dragging around all of them. I can also select all my layers right here. I can select them there. So that's another tool, is selecting. I need to select multiple objects. And then there's a palette called the alignment palette right here. If you don't see that, you can always open a palette up on through the window menu, and it's alphabetical, so I can just find the very top one, align. And then I can align. So I can align to the left, I can center them, I can also distribute them. So if you watch me right now, I'm going to align to the left, which they probably should be if I brought them down perfectly. And then I'm going to distribute their centers vertically like that. So if you let the computer kind of do the job for you, it's easy. All right. I'm going to name my layers now. This first one right here that I did is going to be called linear. It's going to be linear motion. The second one's going to be ease in, where the object is going to start slow but end fast. And this one's going to be called ease out. And then this final one's going to be called ease in and out. Like that. Just another trick, if you want to, you can put a label on each layer if you want to. It'll color the layer, and you can color it like, like your art if you want to. Sometimes that doesn't match up, and it really doesn't matter. It's more for just your organization, but it's possible to do most of that. I don't have white here, so I'm just going to go sandstone. Make sure you're saving your work often. Mine is not saved yet, but that's okay. Make sure you save your work. All right, my goal is to move these from the left to the right and demonstrate easing. Easing is a principle where you start slow, you end slow, or you do both, and then you're creating this natural motion. Most things work with easing. The only things that don't work with easing are things that are mechanical or kind of man-made, but most things in the world move with smooth motion. So this is the next kind of principle I want you to demonstrate, and here's the training. Linear motion we've already done, so we want to have a demonstration of that. zoom in on my timeline. I'm just going to set my time, press the letter N. So from 0 to 3 seconds. Let's just work within that little time frame. Playhead's at 0. I'll twirl this up. Remember, we're only working in the transform area. Twirl that down and turn on position animation from where it starts. That's the first step. Go forward in time. Let's say to 3 seconds. And then I'm going to move my box. So if I click and drag and then hold shift, I can bring it over perfectly. And there's my keyframe right there. And these keyframes, again, they're linear keyframes. So my motion should look like this. It looks like a machine or a robot. And since I have my work area here, it just kind of loops itself. That is linear. Ease in, I'm going to do the same animation. I'm going to just press P for position. That twirls down my position information. I'm giving you a lot of extra tips here along the way. Go forward in time and to the same place in time. I'm going to drag my box over and try to align it. You don't have to worry about it being perfect. These are linear keyframes, but I need to change those to ease in. So I'm only going to select the very first keyframe on this one. I'm going to ease that one in. And remember, that is F9. And your keyframe should now look like an hourglass. If I play that back, it starts slow, but it ends at the same exact time because it's not eased out. It's eased in, starting slow. All right, next one. Press P for position. Turn on your keyframe. Go forward in time. This one is ease out. So you can probably guess I need that one to be F9 to ease out. Let's watch that one. It starts fast, then it ends slow. If you look at the in-betweens, you'll see that the dots up here are farther away than the dots down here. The dots further closer together indicates slower motion. The final one is ease in and ease out. Press P, turn on your keyframe, go forward in time. And I want to select both. The way you select both keyframes is that you click and drag through both of them like that, and then press F9. This one's going to start slow, be fast in the middle, and end slow. 4 different motions. All right, to increase the easing on these, because this F9 is just like a default setting, it's not very slow. Let's start with the ease in, and if I select my keyframe here, I have this thing called the graph editor. The graph editor can be a little bit scary because now my keyframes are gone and I have this line chart. There's 2 ways to view this, like this. This is called the value graph, but I prefer the speed graph. I'd recommend that, especially with position information. And this is basically a chart of the speed over time. So you can see that it starts really slow, but then it gradually picks up speed until the end. So that's easing in. I can move these little handles left and right, and I can make it more exaggerated. So you can see it's going to start slow and stay slow, and then it's going to start whipping through there. You can also control the end if you want to. This is going to be the most exaggerated ramp or chart that you can see. So watch this. They start and end at the same time, but that one is starting very slow and ending super fast. Okay, I can get out of my graph editor if I want to, or I can just click on the next box and work on that. This is ease out. So again, I'm just going to select this guy, pull this over here, and be good with it. That one eases out really slow. They still end and start at the same time. All right, this one here, I can select both of them. And you want to ramp kind of like that for your ease in and ease out. Start slow, end slow. Strange to think that those end at the same time, but they do. Very, very different motions. So to be able to control easing and to get into the graph editor, is the key to making your work look a little cooler. You don't have to make it so extreme, but you can if you want to. So that's easing. Use it, demonstrate it, exaggerate it. This is the principle. It's worth a quarter of your grade in this assignment. On to the next lesson. So I'm going to leave the previous one up here so you can see that we can create new compositions within the same project. Still on the same project here, and I can go to Composition New and create a new folder basically for all of my art. New composition. I get all of my same choices here, but I'm going to call this one text. So this is your text training. Okay, I'm just going to leave my composition background black so we have that. The text tool is a new tool that we haven't used yet. It works just like any other text tool in every other program. So it's a little funky in how to move things, but basically it's the same thing. So don't overcomplicate it. It's a text tool. Click the T and then you click on your document and it starts to, it creates a new layer. It says empty text layer and there's a red cursor by default. That's what it is. You might need to do text that is real simple and short and promote something. So I'm going to just be very generic about mine. I'm going to say the, and it's tiny, and I'm just going to type one word. I want to control my text per word sometimes, so I'm just going to do one word at a time. And I have my text selected. I double-clicked it just like any other text editor, and you should see your character palette. Mine is here. If you don't see it, Window and Character. This controls the font, the style, size, and other things like color. You can just simply choose black or white, or you can pick a color from here if you want to. So I'm just going to increase the size. I can click and drag this little blue text right here and make bigger text. While I have it selected here, I can put my mouse outside. If you notice right there, I can now click and drag. By default, it puts the anchor point. If I click and drag, you can see in the lower left-hand corner. You can reposition that if you like. I'm just going to leave it there for now. The font, not a big fan of that. Maybe I can pick something that has a little more style to it. And let's see. Okay, sure. All right, so my text layer is there, and it starts at 0 by default. There's no animation on it, just like any other layer. I can size it. It's going to size from that anchor point. So if I scale it, it's going to go from the bottom left-hand corner. If I want to, I can rotate it just like, I can rotate it just like anything else, and I can move it just like everything else. Therefore, you can animate those properties too. There's a lot you can animate in text as well. So if you ever need extra text animation, just let me know. I want to show you some basic stuff with text. Titles really help promotion. So we need to be able to use text as a tool to communicate. For example, if you had a video, I'm just going to zoom in a little bit here. If you had a video where you wanted the text to come in as like blocks of text, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so we wouldn't want our text to start at the beginning. We would want it to start a little later. So maybe let's say 10 frames in. I'm just going to type 10 right here. And then I want the beginning of my layer to start there. A couple of ways to do it. You can just click and drag like that. Or if you want to, you can click and drag the beginning, the end point. You can trim it so that it starts there. That means that layer will become visible at that point or active. So if I press play, boom, it starts like that. If I wanted to continue that and have maybe the big game, let's maybe say I'm trying to promote the big game coming up this week. I want another layer of text. I've already done a lot of the work here. I've created my text, my font, my style, my size, and position, everything. If I just duplicate this, I'm going to save myself a lot of work. Control or Command D. All right. Now I need to make some changes here. I'm just going to bring this down. I duplicated everything perfectly. I'm going to double click the space right here. That was kind of strange, but that's how you activate your text tool, or you can get the text tool again. Double click right there, and I'm just going to type in BIG. I'm going to use caps, the big. Click off here. I always get my selection tool, maybe reposition it a little bit. You can also use the arrow keys to reposition things. I'm not animating yet. I'm just trying to get it in position. And then where does that start? Maybe 15. Okay. So I'm just going to drag my little layer to that point. Play back. That's too fast. I need to go maybe at 20. Shortcut is a left bracket, and it will place the beginning part of your layer at your playhead. Play it back again. That looks better. The big game. And so I would kind of use that pattern of 10 frames per text layer. So let's do it again. I'm going to go forward 10 frames. Command or Control Shift right arrow is the shortcut, or you can just simply go to 1 second because we're running 30 frames per second. Command or Control D. Drag that layer forward. I'm going to do it in a different order this time. Position the time. Drag this guy down. Game. Experiment with maybe position. It's kind of an interesting spacing right there. I think that looks kind of cool. Let's play back. The big game. Awesome. We can push it a little bit. I'm just going to put my playhead over here so I can see all of it. If I want to recolor a layer or a text, I can just simply click on it and then grab a color from over here. There's a black and white shortcut. Or if I wanted to, I could just click a color here and it's going to color the whole word or the whole paragraph. If I wanted this one to be a different color, maybe I have that one as like an orange. And maybe I leave that one as white. Maybe this one needs to be a little more sputter color. Not so. There we go. The big game. Blue on black is tough to read, but I think that'll work. The big game. Cool. You can also, of course, animate any layer with the transform properties that we learned in the previous project. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to just animate very, very subtly each of the layers. So I'm going to go to the very beginning, or the letter I for endpoint of the layer. If I want to animate the transform property of position, again, this is review. I'm going to click on my position keyframe. It's going to add a keyframe. That's where I want to start. I'm going to go forward in time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frames, let's say. And add another position keyframe. Now the thing is, I position my text to where it should be when it's done. I don't want to animate further. That looks perfect where it was. So I'm actually going to go back to my first keyframe and drag that maybe to the left. So it's going to start left and animate to the right into its final position. Okay? And we learned about easing last lesson. F9 that, make it a little better. You can even go into the graph editor and ease that a little bit more. So using your easing. Okay, if that's not working for you, you can drag that out a little bit and watch it again. I think that looks better. The big game. So I'm having a 10 frame movement eased out, animating the position. Do it 2 more times so you can see it again. Big position keyframe. I have shortcuts as well if you're interested. Just going to put 2 keyframes down. I'm not animating yet, but I'm going to go back to the very first one. My playhead's right on top of that. Maybe this one comes from the right. So it's the big game, like that. I want it to ease out, so we're going to F9 that and come into the graph editor and drag that endpoint so it eases out. Let's watch that. The big game. Cool. Looking good. Game. A lot of shortcuts, so again, that one needs to be eased out, but where's it going to come from? Maybe the left, so we kind of go back to this. And then F9. Graph editor. There we go. Let's watch this one more time. The big game. That one did not animate properly. It should end there, but it comes over here. Here's another thing. This is a whoops, but you can do things like this. You can take 2 keyframes and reverse their order. I'm going to right click, come down to keyframe assistant and reverse them. And now the position is going to be proper. It's going to come from left to right, but my easing is wrong. I got to fix that. The way you do that is you command click this hourglass. It turns it back into a linear keyframe, and then I'm just going to ease this one. So if you know that it's possible to fix things, you can. Not a big deal. You can always undo as well. Let's watch that. That looks good. The final thing I'd like to show you is opacity. These words start at complete 100% opaque layers. They don't fade in at all. So if you wanted to fade something in or dissolve something, that's another word that's used, you can animate opacity. We haven't talked about that yet. Right down here, under our transform properties, there's an opacity button. Right now, everything is set to 100%, which means you can't see through it. But if I click that and animated opacity, maybe I like to animate like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like half of it as fading in and the other half is movement. So maybe I would do a 5-frame opacity animation. I have 2 keyframes, right? They're both at 100%, but I'm going to use my playhead to go to the first one again and set that to 0. Notice it just faded away. So it's going to go from faded away to starting to fade in, and in 5 frames, it's going to be a completely 100% opaque. So this is what that looks like. It's a subtle change, but it's nice. One thing you can do with opacity, since it doesn't have to do with position or size data, I can copy this. I'm just going to select both of these dots, these keyframes, and go to the right position in time on my second layer and paste. If I reveal my keyframes, it has pasted the same information there. I'm going to do the same thing here. What a time saver. I don't have to go through all those steps. I can copy and paste. That looks much better. That's an interesting way to start to use text. So you can use cuts if you want to. You can use easing if you want to. You can introduce opacity if you want to. And you can change the font color, of course. All right, next lesson is going to be on importing your files. There are a lot of files that you can import into After Effects. We've been working with shapes and text, nothing from outside of After Effects, but we can definitely import a lot of stuff. So I'm going to create a new composition and just call this one import so we can get a feel for all the things that we can bring in. Keep my same specs. If I wanted to import something, there's lots of ways to do it. You can double click right here. That's what I do because it's quick. You could also file import file or multiple files. That's another way to do it. Or you can drag and drop if you can. Like I have my stuff on my desktop right there, and I can just drag and drop them if you want to. So however you can get them in there. I'm going to go through several file types that you might use down the road. The first type is a JPEG file. And this is a little bit of graphic design as well. So I'm going to show you the difference between a JPEG and a PNG. A JPEG is an image that has a solid background. So if I was to pull up Google and do a search, you will by this time have some knowledge of copyright. So you'll know, well, if I'm just doing a Google search, most of this stuff is copyrighted. But let's say I wanted a logo and I could click on one, and all of these are typically going to be JPEG images. I'm on a Mac, but it's basically the same thing. I can right click, save image as, and it's going to download a photo for me, depending on where I want to save it. I'm just going to save it to my desktop, and then I would have a JPEG right there if I hit save. I have a JPEG, so I'm going to hide After Effects real quick. I have a JPEG right here that I found from a website called Unsplash. This is a great website for copyright-free images. So if you wanted to find a photo, I just searched for an image there. Okay, so I'm going to minimize or hide this, get this out of the way here. Here's my image right here. It's just of a burger. And there's a solid background. Even if you found it on a white background, a JPEG is going to have a solid white background or some kind of background. All right. We're going to go back to After Effects and import. So again, I like to double click right here, but for the first time, I'm going to show you File, Import, and then File. All right, I have everything on my desktop. This is another thing you got to think about is where are you going to keep your files? If you move them after you import them, your program's going to throw a fit. So figure out where you store things. I would recommend on your Z drive in a folder, but it's a good lesson to learn. If you don't get organized now, you will pay for it later. So I'm going to import. JPEGs are imported very easily. They just kind of come in. There's no additional information to know. It's imported into your asset library here, your project folder, and there's the image right there, and it tells me a little bit about the image. This is actually a very large image, and it's high quality from Unsplash, so really great. To import it into my timeline, I can just simply drag it down here. This will place the start of that layer at 0. You can see it's really big, and it started at 0 right here, and this will extend the whole length of my video. If I zoom out a little bit, you can see that there's this bounding box. That's how big the image is compared to my HD video screen. So we'll need to make it smaller. Making things smaller is tricky because you can squish things and you can squash things like that. We don't want to do that with our images. We want them to remain the same aspect ratio. So while I'm scaling, I have to hold Shift. I'm just going to bring it down kind of like that. And then last, you let go of your mouse. If you do it in that order, it works out. If you don't, it will be squashed and you'll have to do it again. So always Control Z, try it again. Okay, so I've imported a JPEG. The next file I want to show you is a PNG file. So I'm going to hide After Effects. A PNG file can be found on the internet, but you might have to make your own. Let's say I wanted a logo. This picture right here is a JPEG, but let's say you wanted to make a PNG that had transparent background. That's the key difference between a JPEG and a PNG. A PNG can have transparency to it. This is a JPEG, so I need to modify it, and you're welcome to do this in Photoshop. Okay, so I brought in my, this is my old one, this is my new one. This is my burger logo. So in Photoshop, if you've never had Photoshop before, basically it manipulates pixels. Right here I have a layer, okay? And I wanna get rid of the white and save this as a new file. A really cool tool is the Magic Eraser, and it erases by color. So I can just click on these colors, and it's kind of hard for me to see where the cursor is. If I press caps lock, I can get a more accurate cursor. But now I've gotten rid of all the white, and I can save this as a new file type. So it's a little tricky, I know, but a lot of steps, but Photoshop and After Effects work really well together. File, save a copy. And if you ever see that, don't save to the cloud. I would never do that. And you get these choices. So I can pick PNG from this list and call this whatever I want, burger logo. And it's going to take on the default extension .png. Hit save. You might get some other options. Usually just hit OK. And there you go. I'm going to hide Photoshop. And now I have this PNG logo. You can see it looks a little different when I pull it up. Now I can try to import that, and let's see what happens. I'm going to double click this time. Find my PNG. Again, I've put it where I want it. I'm not going to move it later. And hit OK. And now I'm just going to do the same thing. I'm going to drag it down here, except on top of the burger. And look at that. I can see through that logo like this. And I can place that wherever I want to. Maybe I want it over here. Cool. If I were to bring in my old JPEG, let me show you what that looks like. Here's the difference. It's got a white background. Okay, there's the difference between those two types of files. Hide this background here. JPEG, PNG. So know the difference, use them appropriately when you need something transparent, you know what to do now. All right, I think that lives over there for now. Okay, another file type is a GIF. We can bring in GIFs. So animated images can be brought in. It used to be not allowed, but they allow it now. So I have a GIF that I downloaded from the website Giphy. Again, this is just for demonstration purposes. So I've taken a bunch of images that are copyrighted and just I want to try them out. So if I press play, this is my GIF that I'm going to grab and bring in. And this time I'm going to drag and drop. So if I move my program over a little bit and have my GIF here, here's another way to import your work. If I can see it all, I can drag and drop right there, and it brings in my file. So I've shown you 3 ways to import. I'm just going to drag this right down here. And if you take a look, this GIF has a lot more details to it. It has frames per second. It has a length. It has resolution. So keeping that in mind, like this plays one time for 5 seconds at 10 frames per second, and then it's over. If I zoom into my timeline here, you can see that doesn't play for very long. It's trying to match the frame rate of my document, which is 30. So it only plays for a very short amount of time. With movies and GIFs, you can control a little bit more. So dig a little deeper, right click on that GIF, interpret footage, main, those 3 clicks right there, and you can control all sorts of stuff. You can control the frame rate. Let's say if I wanted it to play at 30 frames per second, it might go quite fast. And then I can have it loop, let's say 100 times. Once I hit OK, you'll see that, oh, I can actually extend that GIF and make it loop and actually be visible for a long period of time. It should play pretty fast. That's too fast. I'm going to adjust it back to 10 frames per second. And I can make that play for quite a bit longer. I'm going to move this over. Sweet. So now it's looping forever. GIFs are fun. Use them if you can. You can make your own GIFs and bring them in if you want, or you can make GIFs from here and export them. More file types. You can bring in movies. You can bring in sound. So let's do a movie real quick, a video. Okay, so I have a video that I found. I was able to download a video. So however you can get a video, if I play it right here, this has sound. And it's a very small video of burgers sizzling. So maybe you want to use sound from it. Maybe you want to use the video from it. Who knows what you're going to do. I'm going to double click because that's my preferred method. And I'm going to bring in that video. Videos come in many formats. So an MP4 is very friendly. A MPEG is friendly. A .mov file is friendly. AVIs. So there's lots of types. You can bring that in. It'll tell you the resolution of it, the length of it, the frame rate, all sorts of audio information. There's tons of information there. Again, you just throw it there. It has a certain length to it. Of course, you can control the same things as a GIF, but it's going to be right there. And when I press play, I can hear the sound as well. Make this a little bigger because it's kind of small. So I'm importing just multiple documents. This lesson isn't about making it look pretty. It's about what can you import. So a note here. Look at that layer. It's got a little sound button, which means there's audio on that. So you can turn that off or on if you want to. Let's say I just wanted to hear it. I'm going to turn the video off and then just use the audio. Okay, I could reverse it and I could just see it instead. Okay, so there's lots of choices. I'm just going to leave that because I wanted the video. I want that to be playing. All right, so those are the visual files that typically are imported. Next are audio files. There's many audio files. You could do a voiceover. I have a microphone in class. You could bring in music if you wanted to, or you could bring in sound effects. I have 2 of those. I have sound effects and I have a MP3 song. I do want to show you a resource that you might consider. There we go. YouTube's audio library. Now, this might be blocked at school, so if you want to get music, you might have to ask me about it. But this has music and sound effects. So if I wanted music, I could filter by the type of mood I'm in, and if I wanted it to be funky, there we go. We're going to filter by that, and then I could play the song. It might not sound very good on your end, but then I can download the song. Those are MP3s, great files to import. You can also import WAV files or AIFF files. You can also browse some sound effects. So there's all sorts of stuff here, and you can search for things too. You can say, well, what if I wanted to hear a horn? And there are horns that you can download too. So all of these are downloadable and usable by you. They are royalty-free songs and sounds for you to use in your work. YouTube wants you to upload work that is royalty-free, copyright-free, so you're not stealing songs. Okay, I'm gonna hide this. I have two pieces of audio that I've already downloaded. Right here I have something that's a swish or a punch. I like to use that sound effect if something's kind of entering quickly. And then I have a funky song. All royalty free. Again, you can double click and import. I'm going to do the song first. It's an MP3. And I'm going to drag that into my timeline. It's not visual, it's only auditory. So you'll notice that there's only a audio button that I can turn off and on. One thing you'll want to know is a couple of ways to edit that. If I twirl this down and I keep going, I can see the levels for this. And then the waveform, which is the kind of the visualization of the sound. You can control and animate the audio levels. If you wanted it to fade out or fade in, you could do that. Going from a low number to 0 would fade that sound in. You can see the waveform is there, so that will play back as is. If you just press play, it'll play. Also, you can scrub holding the Command or Control button down, and it will scrub the video and the audio. So that's kind of nice. All right, let's say that's too loud. I'm just going to go -10 decibels. And you can see the waveform gets smaller. If I play it back, it's really not as loud, so I can go down even further if I wanted to. The last thing I want to bring in is a sound effect. Here's my sound effects right here. And if I bring that in there, I'm going to twirl that down as well. I only want one of these sound effects, so I got to look into my waveform. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit, and let's say I'm going to solo this, a nice little button there. I can only hear that one. Let's say I really like that one right there. This one right here. I don't want to play anything else. What we can do is we can chop layers too. So if I wanted to, I could set my endpoint, Option or Alt left bracket, Option or Alt right bracket, and that chops that layer. I can only see that one or hear that one. I can also increase the decibels for that one. Let's say if I wanted it really loud. My waveform is getting to the point where it's kind of hitting the top. That's bad, so I'm going to do 15 instead. There we go. Listen one more time. Sweet. Sounds good. And then you pick the time at which that might come in. So when you're editing your video, maybe the appropriate time for this logo to come in. If I just did a quick animation and had my logo kind of whoosh in, maybe it starts from over here and it comes to over here. I would want my audio to line up with that. And hit LL. That helps me see my waveform really quick. Nice shortcut. And then I would time the motion. Let's hit F9, make that look a little prettier. That comes in. Looks pretty good to me. So you're finished. Again, this is not a pretty design, but it's more about importing, and a quick video would look something like this. Oh, I have it muted or soloed, sorry. All right, that's importing. You can import many more things than I showed you, but that's one way to get content into your After Effects project quickly. And you can see there's multiple files, multiple ways to add content to your timeline very quickly. This final lesson is kind of a mishmash of other things that you'll need to know. First of all, I need a new composition, and I'm going to call this miscellaneous, and then I'm going to make a comma or a dash. So this is organization. It's going to be null objects. It's going to be pre-compositions, pre-comp, and then effects. So lots of stuff in this lesson that just kind of tidy things up and help us with some cooler things. You'll notice that over here, I'm starting to get messy. There's footage, there's GIFs, there's PNGs, there's JPEGs, there's sounds, and there's compositions. There's lots of stuff. If you want to, you can get yourself organized. I'm going to show you one thing here. There is a folder icon right down here, and you can make a new folder and call it, let's say, comps. Those are compositions in the animation world, and you can drag files to that folder and get yourself organized. So if I want all my compositions in a folder, you can then organize yourself. I would do the same with footage or sound to kind of tidy things up, because this can get kind of messy. The next thing is, let's say I'm just going to make two shapes here. I'm going to make myself a kind of a rectangle, and let's make ourselves an ellipse or a circle that is different color that I can kind of work with. And I'm going to make another type of layer. Some people want a background, or they want to transition from one thing to another. So another object that we can use is called a solid. You can achieve that by going either through the layer, new solid, or right-click down here, new solid. There's the same menu there. And you can choose a background, or basically this is just the size of your composition right here. You can say make comp size. I thought I picked a color there. There we go. It names it for you, and you just hit OK. And this is basically just this big block here. So it's not a shape layer, but it kind of looks like it. So I have three things here. I have a solid and then two shapes there. Okay. So of course I can animate these separately. So if I just kind of quickly did a animation, if I took them off the screen like that, and I eased those, went into my graph editor, made sure those looked pretty. There we go. So they're going to come in nice and slow. Cool. I could even stagger them. What if I wanted one to come in before the other one? That's kind of neat. Okay. I have those two things moving, but let's say I wanted them to maybe scale at the same time, or I wanted to control them together. The next object is called a null object. This object will control other things, and it's through parenting that we do that. You can parent other objects too as well. You'll kind of find out how to do that. But if I go right-click null object, it'll give me this sort of weird looking thing here. This is not going to render. You're not going to see it, but you can attach things to it and control it. So you'll see this right now here. If I use either the pick whip or the menu on my second layer, my shape layer, I can parent these. So now my shape layer is parented to my null object. I can do the same thing with this one. I prefer the pick whip because it's just fun. But now if I move my null object, my two shapes are moving with it. And I can animate my null object. Let's say if I wanted to scale them. I'm just going to do a quick scale right here. If I wanted to scale from 75% to 100% and then back to 90%. I did a quick sort of ease right there just to create something interesting. Here's what that looks like. So my objects come in as they did before, and then right here they're going to scale up as a group basically, and then back down. Oop, low battery, gotta hustle. Okay, so that's a null object. You can also group things called pre-composing. Oops, don't want to save. Pre-composing is putting things in a group. Let's say I wanted those three things or these four things in a group. Then I wanted to keep them together, and I can go into that group or use that whole group as one object. So it's called nesting. This is the last thing here before we get into effects. if I right click, I can go to pre-compose. And you get to name it. You can just call it, I'm just going to call it group. And this, if you ever have this choice, I can move all of my attributes or my effects or my animations to this new group, which is what you want. Usually it has to do with effects. So you hit OK. And now you'll have a composition called group or groups. And in this group is everything. And I can get to there by drilling down, by double clicking. And now I'm into that group, and you can see there's a new tab here called group, and I'm inside of that, and all 4 of those layers are there. In my original composition though, it's one layer, and that layer can be turned off or on, and I can animate that layer if I want to as well. So you can have these layers upon layers if you want to. It's good for organization, and sometimes you have to when things get so complicated. So I could scale this whole thing now if I wanted to. I wanted to do easy ease there. Scale up the whole thing. So I have my scale of my pre-composed shot here, but then inside, all of this animation is still happening inside, giving me this double animated sort of look. Kind of cool. All right, finally, I want to show you quickly, check my battery power here, 9%. TikTok. All right, effects. I'm not going to be able to show you more than 1% of these things. I can put effects on layers, and I'm just going to use my pre-composed layer to demonstrate this. There's 2 ways to find effects. One is the effects menu right here. I can choose my effects from here. There's things like adding noise or grain, generating all these effects here, like shapes. You can simulate lightning and rain, and there's everything. So you can do anything, and you can also stack them. Or you can search for them through the effects palette. So I'm going to go here, window, effects. You can search for them. I'm going to do rain because that's kind of an interesting one. So I can type that in, rain. And you'll have some options here. It's going to take you some time to figure out which ones to add, but CC anything is usually really good. So I'm going to drag and drop this either on top of here or on top of here. On the right, the left-hand side, I'll get this whole menu, and you'll notice everything can be animated, and all these things can be adjusted. And if you play it back, I don't see a whole lot. There we go. There's some rain. It's giving me this really interesting look right now. I can control the size of the drops, the number of the drops, the color of the drops, and so on and so on. I can also animate those. That just gave me a really interesting look right there. I can put more effects on. Maybe I go through here and I go to distort, and I go to maybe magnify. Magnify is an interesting effect. Okay, so I want my magnification shape to be, let's say, large. I'm going to put my effect on top so you can stack them. There's my effect, and I can also move this around. Oh, that's strange. Magnification. Pretty interesting what it's doing here. So I have 2 effects on there now. I have a magnify and a raindrop. I haven't even animated it yet. So once that shape kind of goes into this magnification zone, it does that. And I can also animate things too. If I wanted my rainfall to go away, I could say, well, maybe my drops are at full power here. I'm going to activate my keyframe, go forward in time, and reduce that down to 0. I can see these 2 little tiny dots here indicating that I have keyframes. I'm going to press U. That reveals any keyframe. So then I have this really complex animation pretty fast. I have this scale. I have 2 effects. I have a magnification and rainfall happening. Those are just happening And then inside of my pre-comp, I have two things happening. My two shapes are animating. And then now I have my effect, which is now animating away like this. Your computer might start kind of working pretty hard. Mine's working pretty hard. I can hear my fan and my battery's going down pretty low pretty quickly. But that is the gist of it. So you have organization in your project. You have the ability to make null objects that control other things. You can pre-comp and group things, and you can put effects on any layer and animate them. So I hope that opens your mind and gives you some ideas of how to add and make your video interesting. It's just going to take some time for you to explore all of the ideas that are possible.